Thank you very much, Senators Morton and Marcelino. I am joined by some members of our board, Ed Kelly, who's president of S&P Insurance, Sal Turano, who is the president of Abstracts Incorporated, also joined by some folks in the audience, Anita McDougall and Laura Pandelakis, who are from the Long Islanders for Tax Reform. Thank you very much. And thank you, senators, for focusing the spotlight on what may be a fiscal Armageddon for many localities throughout this state. I thank as well Lieutenant Governor Ravitch, as well as E.J. McMahon, who will be following after this presentation, for sounding the alarm many, many years ago. And I just wish their comments had been adhered to long ago, and maybe we wouldn't be in the mess that we are right now. I'm the president of and the executive director of the Center for Cost-Effective Government. We're an organization that was put together in 2012. It's a group of about 100 of the most prominent business and community leaders throughout the island, dedicated toward making Long Island and New York State a more affordable place in which to work, do business, and to live. They've been looking at issues from consolidation, purchasing consortiums, but the thing that's really striking our attention right now, getting our attention, is mandates and the crushing impact that it has on localities. As you know, before this stint as the executive director of this organization, I had served 15 years as a county legislator, 3 years as a state assembly member, so I got to know how things were working up in Albany, and 8 years as a county executive. And I was at one point the president of the County Executives Association. And I want to thank the Senate because the Senate was always there for us. Whenever there was a proposal by the governor to cut back on aid to localities, the Senate was the go-to guys. We would go to you guys and you would be there for us. We would get the money back, or at least try to keep our heads above water. What was attempted to do to the localities was, we're going to cut your money, but we're going to keep the same mandates that are in place the previous year, and you have to keep paying out all this money, but we're going to give you less help to do so. So you were always there to help us make up that difference. What we're asking for now is your help in removing the mandates from the very first instance. Now, when I came into office as county executive in 2004, localities were being crushed, especially counties, with the behemoth of Medicaid, excuse me. Unbelievable exponential increases from year to year, 17%, 18%, 15% year over year. We were looking for a solution. Some of the county executives had asked me my advice, having been in the Assembly, and said, the only way you're going to fix this, you have to get the Speaker of the Assembly and the Senate Majority Leader in the same room at the same time to agree to a two-house bill, the same bill. And they said, it's a great idea. You know, we never went down that path, but it's probably impossible. But you know what? With a lot of pressure from the Association of Counties and taxpayer groups around the state, we actually got it done. The Speaker and the Senate Majority Leader sat down with us in the same room, agreed to one bill, not a one-house bill here and a different one-house bill there. They came together on the same Medicaid bill. We passed it. And we breathed a sigh of relief, all the county executives. We thought we had gotten by. Well, for a year or two we did. We got the cap in place, and thank you very much. It was tremendous. But a few years later we were starting to see that the Medicaid behemoth was being dwarfed by something else, the pension behemoth. Unbelievable, out of control. To show you how bad it was, we were getting an increase in Suffolk County alone, and it was mirrored by our friends in Nassau, $45 million. That was not our bill. That was the increase from the previous year alone just on pension. $45 million, matched by another $45 million the next year. Every 3 or 4 years, the pension obligation was doubling. Not just with us, but with all the other municipalities around the state. You wonder why they're going toward collapse? Add to that the fact that police salaries were increasing $40 million a year, Nassau and Suffolk County. I'm not talking about more brick and mortar and more cars and more equipment, just the salaries alone. So here you are as an executive, nickel and diming, trying to save $50,000 here, $100,000 there, and then you go, oh my gosh, we just got a bill for $45 million of new money we have to come up with for a pension, and $40 million in new money we have to come up with for police salaries. Just two items. Our general fund is $49 million. And we have to come up with these increases every year. So you see how unsustainable it is. We would pass a balanced budget in November, December. The bill would go out. For the following year, we're balanced. But on January 1, we're already thinking in the back of our mind, when we have to put the next year's budget together in September of that year, we're $90 million in the hole. We have to come up with this new money. Where are we going to get it? This is the problem that localities are facing. And we were able to, you were able to get away with it a little bit because stimulus came in after the collapse in 2008, and it held you over for a couple of years. And then what happened after that with the schools and the towns and the counties? You had some reserves. But now they are exhausted. And that is why we have a situation where what we are seeing in Detroit and what we've seen in San Bernardino, California, and Stockton and Viejo, what the whole premise of this meeting is all about, you may be seeing that here in localities throughout the state of New York. Now, a couple of years ago, the governor put together a panel on mandates. And they asked me my reaction to it after I read it. And I called it 89 pages of fluff. It did nothing. It said nothing. There were no specifics. If we want to get out of this hole, we have to go back to the tactic we used with Medicaid. You have to have a very specific bill or a series of bills and get both sides, the Senate and the Assembly, to come on board. So what do you need? You have to know what is the problem, number one. Number two, you need to know what the solution is. And three, and most importantly, you have to have the will to implement the solutions. There's four major problems that we see as a center that should be tackled immediately. Pension obligation, mandatory arbitration, the Triborough Amendment, and worker disability fraud. If we can tackle those issues in 2014, I think our localities can survive. But if we continue to talk in generalities, like changing the tax system or doing something that we know is not going to happen for years down the road, if it ever happens at all, many of these localities are going to collapse. I'm just going to quickly go over pension. What's the problem? We guarantee a rate of return for the pensioners. It doesn't happen in the private sector. You put in money, it's matched by the employer, and it rises and falls with the market. But here we're guaranteeing a 7.5% to 8% rate of return. What happens if that doesn't materialize? We, the taxpayers, make up that difference. And you can get away with that when it's the boom 90s. But when the bubble burst in 2000 and 2001, and then you had September 11th, 10 years worth of growth dissipated in a month. And then the controller, whoever that may be at the particular time, comes to the localities and say, you have to make that all up in 1 year. In 1 year. Well, then we got the opportunity to borrow. And you wonder why they had to borrow? Because you're asking localities to make back 10 years of growth in 1 year. It's impossible. And then when they borrow, they have to pay interest on the borrowing, which shouldn't be the case, by the way. If you had to borrow to get by, at least make it interest-free. But beyond that, the bigger problem is the guaranteed rate of return. Why do we have that? There's no need for that. We shouldn't have a defined benefit system. We should have a defined contribution system as you have in the private sector. I submit and I concede that that cannot be done on existing employees. but at the very least we can do it on prospective employees. I thought that was going to be done a couple of years ago when they talked about pension reform. They punted. It never happened. So that's one solution. Let's go to defined contribution. Secondly, overtime in the base. We have situations where there are some public safety retirees making $184,000 per year on the pension. The Wall Street Journal notes that there were now 3,700 individuals throughout the state of New York with pensions over $100,000 per year. People in the private sector say, this is nuts. How does this happen? Do you know the income you have to get a pension of $120,000, $130,000 a year as a public employee? What's happening? We know. The last couple of years, they're bilking up the overtime to the max. So that means that someone with a base pay of 90 might be making 180 grand in the last year, and they're factoring that in to the pension base, and that's how you get these outlandish pensions. We see here that there are now, in New York City, 13 police officers retired at age 40 making $100,000 a year. Unbelievable. 28 workers making over $195,000 a year on the pension. So what do? End it. End overtime going into the base. Now, the previous suggestion that I had with the defined contribution, that's for prospective employees. We're not going to see any immediate saving from that. But if you want to have some real saving right now, stop overtime now on existing employees from being factored into the equation. Not in 5 years, not in 10 years, not in 30 years, right now. So that when people are putting their budgets together, they don't have to worry about another $184,000 pension. And that, I submit, can be done. And if someone wants to challenge it, let's go to court and let a court make the decision on that, okay? Then you have not only these individuals making too much money on the pension, we have too many of them making too much money. The 20-year retirement is something we really have to reconsider for public safety individuals. You could have an individual comes in at 23, is retiring at 43. That person who replaces him retires at 43. When that original person is 83, if he lives that long, you have 4 people being paid for that one police officer position. That has to change. So we have solutions here. It's just a matter of having the will to implement them. Let me add this as well. When we talk about these reforms, they have to be real reforms. I was getting very excited a couple of years ago when I saw that panels were being put together. They were talking about pension reform. The Tier 5, the Tier 6, it was window dressing, at least for the near term. Changing it from 62 to 63 for new employees to retire, that's nice. It doesn't save you a heck of a lot of money right now. Asking for more contribution, that's good. It should be done. It was done. But you're not going, that's only for the new employees. You're not going to see much money filtering in now to save these localities on the cusp of bankruptcy. Let's go to the next topic, mandatory arbitration. $200,000 police officers is not an exaggeration anymore. It's here. It's unbelievable, but it's happening. Now, not only impacts your ability to do proper police work, to put officers on the street, but it's gobbled up the entire budget. I mean, our general fund, as I said, $49 million, whatever. You look at a tax bill in Suffolk County, it's $100 for the general fund. Look at the police district, which is separate, $1,000. The police district, a small part of the budget, it dwarfs the general fund. There's no discretionary part of the budget left. Between the mandates and the money that goes into the police department, there's nothing else left for anyone else. And that's why all these not-for-profits, all these groups, these services, they're being decimated. You know, Willie Sutton was once asked, why do you rob banks? And he said, because that's where the money is. If you ask a county executive, why do you look for money from the police department? Because that's where the money is. That's where all the money is spent. It's not just that mandatory arbitration has brought us to these outlandish salaries, but you have to look at the benefits and the work rules that are embedded in these crazy decisions. In Suffolk County, I know it's matched in Nassau County. It's not just that there's a $200,000 officer. There's 26 sick days every year, 25 plus X days, which are just extra days off, 13 paid holidays, up to 6 weeks vacation. It could be up to 100 days paid off each year. So it's not only this tremendous amount of money you're paying out, but it's the number of days off that makes it prohibitively expensive. Now, some people say, well, you're a county executive. Why didn't you get rid of that? How can I get rid of that? I can't go in there on my own and say, this is outrageous, this is unconscionable, stop it. They go to PERB and they win. Why? Because they can go to the arbitrator, and the arbitrator sides with them time after time. Or you can negotiate it out. What do you think, they're just going to give it back to me? If I'm going to want to get some of these work rules back, I'm going to have to give them a 6% salary increase every year for the next 10 years. It doesn't work. We need help. We've got to get rid of the mandatory arbitration system. So how can we do that? 2 ways. Number one, just get rid of it altogether, which should be the case. By the way, federal public employees, their law enforcement, they don't have mandatory arbitration. Some people say, well, you need that because you don't want to strike. You can't strike in the federal level either. You don't have mandatory arbitration, okay? But we thought, again, I got excited because the governor was talking about doing something that I've been recommending, that EJ's been recommending. Let's have the 2% cap on awards like Chris Christie in New Jersey did a couple of years ago. Okay, he's talking about it's going to be done. It's put in the budget. It's taken out of the budget. But what was put in the budget was full of loopholes. They accepted step increases, and it wasn't applying to every locality, just a few localities. So let's get a real 2% cap. The governor put together a panel. We're going to have the unions in there. We're going to have business people in there. We're going to have legislators in there. They come up with something, and then I'll support it. Nothing happened. Why? Because unless everyone comes to a consensus, we're not going to do anything. Do you think the union was going to support that? Can you imagine if you put the union on the panel for the property tax cap? Do you think you'd have a property tax cap right now? No way. You have to move forward and make the tough decision. So let's get a real hard 2% cap. Hello, Senator Boyle. Third, tri-borough amendment. The main thing about the tri-borough, why it's so insidious, is that it totally eviscerates the union's incentive to negotiate or to give back. So I might want to be very eager as a county executive to say, look, these work rules are a bit nuts. We've got to get rid of them. Or I've got to give you a 0%. Or I need you to change this or that. Or get a contribution for your health care, for instance. They say, go pound salt because I still get my increases. Now look, if the contract expires, is anyone going to be so cold-hearted or foolish to say, okay, all you employees, you don't get a paycheck? Of course not. These people have families. They have to pay their bills. Of course you get a paycheck. But what the tri-borough amendment did is continue the steps even after the expiration of the contract. So you're sitting back and you're getting a raise even though you don't have a contract in place. We in New York are the exception. We are the anomaly when it comes to this crazy doctrine. It's time it goes. No other state around the union deals with this kind of craziness. That's why there's no incentive to negotiate. Please get rid of the tri-borough amendment. It's the most complained of thing from our school districts and our localities today. Finally, disability fraud. Take a guess at the percentage increase in the number of people who've gone on some kind of workers' disability from 1959 to today. Think of a number. Try 640%. You cannot tell me that our workplace is that much more dangerous than it was in 1959. I would submit it's probably a lot more safe today than it was back then. Something has changed. The culture has changed. It's become a cottage industry today. Some of these statistics are just incredible. We saw what happened on the Long Island Railroad. this culture of, oh, it's just, part of the system. Even in New York City, according to the New York Post, 1/3 of all New York City police department retirees have some type of disability pension. The problem in New York is we have a presumption, a law that's written into the books that says if you have a heart or a lung ailment, it is presumed that it was related to the job. Thus, you have all of this disability payout, which is starting to bankrupt the system. So we have solutions here. Go on the pension side, let's get rid of the overtime factored into the equation, and let's go for the long term into a defined contribution system. Get rid of mandatory arbitration, or at the very least, get a 2% hard cap. Get rid of the Triborough Amendment, and get rid of the presumption in our disability rules. Now, I'm going to have a pension pretty soon, whether I'm at 55 or 62, as hopefully you all will as well. People ask me, well, are you saying things that are going to hurt yourself? Let me tell you, I'm the first one to say, I think I should be paying more as a future pensioner. Why? Because I want to have a pension in 20 years. You know what happens in Detroit and San Bernardino and Viejo when they go bankrupt? It's not just the bondholders who pay. It's the retirees who are going to pay a lot more than even the bondholders. So if we don't give in a little bit right now, there's going to be doom at the end, and you killed the goose that laid the golden egg. Retirees or present employees in Suffolk County pay zero on their health care contribution. Zero. Who gets that? It's nuts. It has to stop. How do we make these changes? We've been talking about control boards, bankruptcy, whatever. Again, the governor got me excited there for a while, saying we're going to get control boards throughout the state. I've never been an executive who feared control boards. I think they're great. I think they're a great tool. They give you the power to do things you'd otherwise be unable to do. We should embrace them. But the kind of control boards the governor's talking about, again, it's fluff. Oh, we're going to put this panel together and we'll tell localities, we'll confirm, yeah, you got a problem. Well, thanks for telling me something I already know. I know I got a problem. I need authority to do the very tough things that have to be done. So, Senator Marcellino, when you ask, what's the number one thing that has to happen here? There's got to be the authority to undo some of these insane contracts. That's the way these places are surviving around the country. And I vehemently, I respect Assemblyman Brodsky tremendously. Very, very bright man and very committed to his views. But when, he criticized E.J. McMahon, who said it was a spending problem, it's not a spending problem. It is a spending problem. And it's not just something that's going to go away without tackling the spending. That's where it emanates from. He says, well, the cities are collapsing. The cities are collapsing because they've overspent in their obligations. What's the root of the problem? It comes back to the spending. So, long story short, we've got to get an outline. We've got to get a bill of specifics. No more generalities. No more sweeping it under the rug. And I commend the Senate because you've always been in the lead, and I understand how frustrating it could be to put up a bill where you become a target now, and you don't have it mirrored, in the Assembly. Say, what am I putting it up for if it's going nowhere anyway, and I got to take all these barbs? Well, I can promise you this: if there's leadership from the Senate in 2014 with the type of reforms that we've laid out here today, the Center for Cost-Effective Government will have your back. Unshackle Upstate will have your back. The Empire, I'll let EJ speak for himself. I know the Manhattan Institute and taxpayers throughout the state will have your back. Assemblyman Brodsky is right. There has to be a conversation. But it can't be in generalities anymore. These localities are on the brink of collapse. It has to be now. It has to be specifics. It has to be with a real set of bills put in. It has to come from the Senate. We will make sure that we get the Assembly leaders in the same room, put the pressure on them, and then let the people of this state see that there is some light at the end of the tunnel. So thank you all very, very much for your time, your consideration, and hope we made a few points that were cogent.